Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everyone. Steve, as you know, we were at the Academy Library last week, and there is an entire section on Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes, there is.
And we cannot possibly cover his career in 1, 2, 3, 4 episodes. I mean, it's just, there's too much to say.
There's so much. And what hasn't been written?
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things that we thought would be fun for listeners would be to talk about the actors who have been the most frequent collaborators with Alfred Hitchcock.
And he loved to work with the same actors over and over again.
Yeah.
Almost like his little repertoire company. And he worked with some really great superstars, along the way, multiple times. So we're going to get into some of his more successful frequent collaborators.
Yes. And we're going to start with one that I think everybody knows, Mr. Cary Grant. Hitchcock is quoted as saying about actors in general, "I believe directing actors is really only a matter of getting good actors in the first place. Then you have a chat with them." Now, I would say that that's probably very true of Cary Grant, right?
Yes. I think he qualifies.
Yeah, exactly. Now, a lot of scholars and a lot of the books that I've read have said that Cary Grant was Hitchcock's fantasy alter ego.
Oh, totally.
Hitchcock responded to that saying, "Silliness. When I look into my mirror, I don't see Cary Grant. I look into my mirror as little as possible because the person who looks back at me has always seemed something of a stranger who doesn't look at all the way I feel. But somehow he kept getting into my mirror." So whether Hitchcock thought of Grant as his fantasy alter ego or not, their collaborations on 4 classic Hitchcock films created, I think, some of their best work.
Oh, yes.
The first is Suspicion in 1941. Now, at that point, Hitchcock knew Grant socially, but this is the first time they had worked together. And Grant was Hitchcock's biggest Hollywood name at that time period to appear in one of his films. Hitchcock was able in this film to turn Grant from this charming leading man into this very, very suspicious and dark leading man. I mean, he had been playing, as you remember, in those romantic comedies, Bringing Up Baby, 1938, His Girl Friday, 1940, The Philadelphia Story, 1940 as well. His character, Johnny Aysgarth, is a very different type. He's cold, he's calculating, and perhaps capable of anything, including murdering his wife. His first film with Hitchcock, by all rights, should have been his last, because some quote Grant as saying that he swore after working on Suspicion he would never work with Hitchcock again. There were also reports that he thought that Hitchcock gave all of his attention to Joan Fontaine, and Joan Fontaine was famously difficult to work with.
Famously with
lots of people, but particularly with Grant as well. However, Fontaine is quoted as saying that she thought that Hitchcock neglected her altogether. Maybe he neglected her because she was basically playing the same role that she played with him in Rebecca.
Yeah, it was exactly the same role.
Right.
Totally agree.
Fontaine also claimed that Grant accused her of stepping in his light, which would overshadow him. So there was a lot going on that set. Maybe that was what caused him to say he would never work with him again. Because he was later quoted as saying, "I have only happy memories. They're all vivid because they're all interesting. It was a great joy to work with Hitch. He was an extraordinary man." So who knows what the truth was. One of the things that Hitchcock and Grant agreed on is that they wanted the character to actually be capable of the murder. But the studio would not have it.
Yeah, the studio did not like that at all.
No, they didn't want his image to be darkened at all. So they had to change the ending.
Don't you hate that ending?
I know, it's a terrible ending.
I hate to say it. Does it make sense?
It's absolutely, it's a horrible ending. According to one of the books that I read that we'll list in the sources, Grant enjoyed taking risks with his image and his career. And here arrived on set for this film being thrilled at the opportunity of starring as a cold-blooded killer. Suspicion also has a lot of other Hitchcock alumni that repeat in many films. We'll talk about one of them later. And Joan Fontaine won the Oscar for Best Actress for her role in this. And one tiny little side note, the glowing glass of milk that goes up the stairs, yes, it did have a small flashlight inside the glass.
Oh, clever.
Now, the next film he did, of course, is Notorious. It's another version of Grant that has him somewhat detached and dark. Alicia Huberman, played by Ingrid Bergman, is a promiscuous party girl daughter of a convicted Nazi spy. She's approached by a man named Devlin, who is played by Cary Grant. Now, he's a U.S. government agent, and he wants Ingrid Bergman to spy on her father's Nazi friends and acquaintances. She ends up agreeing to do it, but she falls in love with Cary Grant, and he falls in love with her.
And who wouldn't, because it's Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman.
Exactly. Grant plays Devlin with this really uncustomary cynicism and a real edge. I might even go so far as to say, I think he's a little abusive to poor little Ingrid.
He's kind of a dick to her. He really is.
He is.
He so slut-shames her.
Yeah, no, he does. It's a common denominator with Grant's roles, his ability to manipulate a woman into getting what he wants. But Hitchcock is able once again to mine this dark side of Cary Grant that audiences aren't necessarily accustomed to. Of course, in the end, he saves Ingrid Bergman from being poisoned to death, and they walk away with a win for the good guys, although we're not so sure that it's going to turn out very well for Claude Rains.
Yeah, Claude Rains, not so much.
Yes. After filming ended on this film, Cary Grant kept the famous Unica key. I don't know if you ever heard that story, but the key that is very integral to the plot.
So important, yeah.
He hangs on to it. A few years later, he gave the key to co-star Ingrid Bergman, saying that the key had given him luck and hoped it would do the same for her. And then many years later, at a tribute to Sir Alfred Hitchcock, Bergman went off script and presented the key to him.
Oh.
Moving on to Catch a Thief, 1955. All right, Grace Kelly is 26 years old.
And at the peak of her beauty, I might
Cary
add.
Grant is 51. And at the peak of his beauty.
Maybe the peak of his beauty, too.
And you know me, I hate the disparity between their ages, but wow, they were a stunning couple.
Sizzling.
And they had such elegance. I mean, even Diane Cannon, who was married for 3 years to Cary Grant, talked about, and she was married to him when he was in his 60s, 70s. Yeah. What a great physique he had, and that he never exercised. So must be good genes, right?
I hate Cary Grant.
I know, me too. Now, apparently Grant and Kelly were two of Hitchcock's favorites. Hitchcock is quoted as saying, "Knowing Cary is the greatest association I've had with any film actor. Cary is the only actor I ever loved in my whole life."
Oh, he so wanted to be Cary. I want to be Cary.
Me too. MovieWeb's Heather Lawton is quoted as saying that Grant was on the verge of retirement prior to Catch a Thief, but couldn't pass up the offer of filming on the French Riviera and having Grace Kelly as his co-star. It was at this point in his career that Grant really knew his value. I mean, and he knew his value to Hitchcock at this point. He's quoted as saying, "Hitch likes me a lot, but at the same time, he detests me. He would like to be in my place because he can imagine himself in my place." I don't know. There's an interesting dichotomy
I know.
There.
Interesting, complicated relationships there.
Very. Grant had many privileges on the set. His contract called for an air-conditioned limousine, either a Lincoln or a Cadillac, with a chauffeur that was specially ordered from England and delivered to France, where they were shooting. And Grant drove Hitchcock a little crazy, too, with his demands. He wanted the company to stop shooting every day at 6 p.m. so he could have a dinner at a civilized hour.
Oh, I love that.
I love it too. I think that's a nice way to go.
I'm sure the crew loved it.
Yes. Now, the final film, and we've talked about this one before, is North by Northwest, 1959. I would say probably Grant's most famous collaboration with Hitchcock. He plays Roger Thornhill, a New York City advertising executive who's mistaken for a government spy. On the run, he meets Eve Kendall, the beautiful Eva Marie Saint, who he falls in love with, but he's not sure he can trust her. With this collaboration, I feel like Hitchcock gives Cary Grant this full-blown hero treatment. He really is the go-to guy. Mount Rushmore, as we've talked about before, was recreated in the studio, which Hitchcock, Eva Marie Saint, and Grant preferred in terms of the safety element. In fact, Cary Grant was quoted as saying, "I was grateful that it hadn't become necessary for me to take a stand for cowardice." Regarding working with Cary Grant, James Mason said, Cary was a very serious person, not the character he played. He would be there waiting, clutching his script as though his life depended on it until the last possible second. Then he would step into his part, confident, flippant, and casual, appearing to be making it up as he went along.
Wow.
Right.
What a testament to Cary Grant's abilities.
Yeah, that effortlessness. Yeah. Eva Marie Saint also said that Cary Grant was a dear to work with and that he told her, after having finished On the Waterfront and Hatful of Rain, now, Eva Marie, you don't have to cry in this movie. No more sink parts for you. We're just going to have fun. And I think they really did. They looked like they really enjoyed themselves.
Had such good chemistry, too.
They did. Cary Grant received $450,000 for this movie, a nice amount for the time, and a percentage of the profits. He also received $315,000 in penalty fees for having to stay 9 weeks past the time for which the contract called for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, interesting. So I feel like in North by Northwest, Hitchcock and Grant really found that perfect blend of kind of the quintessential Cary Grant character, for lack of a better way of saying it. In the end, it seems like Grant and Hitchcock were pretty close enough for Grant to attend a ceremony at the British Consul General in L.A., where Hitchcock was knighted and became Sir Alfred. And Grant also sat at Hitchcock's left when the American Film Institute honored him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Hitchcock was asked about working with Cary Grant on 4 pictures, and he was quoted as saying, "One doesn't direct Cary Grant. One simply puts him in front of a camera. He enables the audiences to identify with the main character. He represents a man we know. He's not a stranger. He is like our brother."
Oh, nice quote.
One film that never got made between Hitchcock and Cary Grant. Hitchcock pitched Cary Grant on the idea of a modern-day Hamlet.
Oh, interesting.
And Grant had said yes to the project, but the script never got made.
Oh, wouldn't you have loved to have seen that?
That would have been fascinating.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I love that. And another actor who worked quite successfully with Alfred Hitchcock was, and you just talked about her, Swedish superstar Ingrid Bergman. She ended up appearing in 3 of Hitchcock's movies, including Spellbound in 1945, Notorious, 1946, which you just mentioned, and then again in 1948 under Capricorn. Hitchcock was sort of notorious for his mistreatment of his female stars.
Yes.
We all know about it. We've all heard about it. Particularly Tippi Hedren, who recounts his actual assault in her 2017 autobiography, Tippi. He had a weird fetishism about these icy cold blondes.
Right.
I mean, it was sort of his thing. He was really into them, and they were very unobtainable to him, so he had to punish them. I think he did it with the characters, and I think he did it with the actresses.
Interesting.
Which is
weird and creepy.
It's very weird. And let's just say that Hitch would not have fared too well today in the Me Too movement.
No, he would not.
Yeah, when you read some of Tippi Hedren's accounts particularly, it is harrowing. But whatever the case, Hitch was a genius, and we get into that whole thing of how do you separate the man from the art.
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, I digress. When he worked with Ingrid Bergman, he actually treated her differently. I mean, yes, he was in love with her, he fantasized about her, he was attracted to her, but he respected her as an artist, which I think was a little bit different from maybe some of the other ladies.
I agree, yeah.
And, she could hold her own, too. I mean, she wasn't a wilting flower. She could stand up for herself. So he, in a weird sense, he let Ingrid Bergman boss him around a little bit.
Yes.
Kind of like he did his wife, Alma. I mean, she totally bossed him around. She was totally in charge. He had that relationship with Ingrid Bergman. However, his infatuation with her didn't go unnoticed at home, and it was the cause of much tension in his marriage with Alma.
Okay.
So, Hitch was still up to his old tricks there, even with Ingrid.
Right.
When she first worked with Hitchcock, it was in Spellbound, 1945, and she had just come off the 1-2-3 punch of Casablanca in 42, For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1943, and Gaslight in 44. So she was a big deal. She was at the peak of her powers. She was one of the most popular actresses in town, and he had to have her. Well, Spellbound was this joint collaboration between Alfred Hitchcock and producer David O. Selznick. They had great success in 1940 with Rebecca, with Joan Fontaine, and this was their follow-up film. Mm-hmm. And you thought that things would go well. Well, they didn't.
Right. They did not.
Yeah, this was not a happy duo. They clashed about everything. I'll get into that a little bit. But one of the reasons that David O. Selznick wanted to make Spellbound was that he wanted to make a film about the benefits of psychoanalysis.
Right, because he had been in psychoanalysis.
Because he had benefited greatly from therapy when he went there to deal with the death of his beloved brother Myron, who died of alcoholism.
Right.
And Myron, I don't know if people know this, he was one of the first super agents in Hollywood.
Yeah.
He really defined what it was to be an agent in this business. Extremely successful, but had a terrible drinking problem, died very tragically, and it really affected Selznick. He got therapy and got help, so he really wanted to do a movie that highlighted the benefits of it.
And in that time period, therapy was
it
not
was
even spoken about.
Taboo. I mean, you didn't talk about being in therapy.
Right.
It seemed like such a mental illness
Right.
back then. In fact, one thing that Selznick did do is he brought his personal therapist on the film set to be the technical advisor.
Okay, yes.
For all the psychoanalyst stuff. So, which, makes sense.
Okay.
And I mentioned that he and Hitchcock did clash over this movie, and it started right off the bat with casting. For the lead role of Dr. Constance Peterman, who was the psychoanalyst who falls in love with the new department head at the hospital, who's played by Gregory Peck, only to discover that he may not be who he says he is. Well, David O. Selznick wanted Dorothy McGuire, and then he wanted Greta Garbo. And then, finally, he wanted his new girlfriend, Jennifer Jones.
Okay.
But Hitchcock had his mind set on Ingrid Bergman. And fortunately, this was one of the battles that Hitchcock won.
Yeah, because I can't imagine those other ladies, as much as we might love them, as playing that role.
None of them.
Yeah.
Maybe Dorothy McGuire.
Maybe Dorothy McGuire.
Maybe, yeah. But the other two, no way. But, another great fight they had was there was a dream sequence in Spellbound, and Hitchcock had brought in the great surrealist artist Salvador Dali to come up with these bizarre images that represent sort of the subconscious mind of Gregory Peck's character.
Right.
Well, Selznick hated it. And he had it cut down to next to nothing, which really pissed off Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes.
So, they just did not get along in this movie. But he got along very well with Ingrid Bergman. And in fact, on working with Hitchcock, Bergman once said that he gave her the best advice that changed her life forever.
Really?
And she said, and this is a quote, "I said, I don't think I can give you that kind of emotion." And Hitchcock sat there and said, "Ingrid, fake it." She goes
I'm going to remember that in my next role. Just fake it.
She goes on to say, well, that was the best advice I'd ever gotten in my whole life, because in all the years to come, there were many directors who gave me what I thought were quite impossible instructions and many difficult things to do. And just when I was on the verge of starting to argue with them, I heard his voice coming to me through in the air saying, "Ingrid, fake it."
Oh, I love that.
It saved a lot of unpleasant situations and a waste of time.
Wow.
So good on him.
Yeah.
Her second film with Hitchcock was the masterpiece Notorious, which you so
Such a
beautifully
great film.
talked about with Cary Grant. It was supposed to be another collaboration between Hitchcock and David O. Selznick, but in mid-production, Selznick sold the property to RKO Studios due to his difficult time he had with Hitchcock on Spellbound.
Okay.
Plus, Daddy needed some cash to fund his pet project Duel in the Sun, which starred his mistress, Jennifer Jones.
Okay. It's all becoming clear now.
It's all connected. Yes.
Well, they did pretty good with RKO then.
They did.
That
They
film
did.
is fantastic.
They did. It's such a good movie. She dominates this film, Notorious. Cary Grant is wonderful. As you mentioned, he played a little bit against type. He's cool and aloof and almost a little villainous.
Yes.
But to me, it's her movie.
It is.
Every frame of this movie, you can't take your eyes off of her. And it was also in this movie where she and Hitchcock really bonded as close friends. They bonded over their expatriate status in America. He was from England. She was from Sweden. And they also connected over their hatred for pretension in Hollywood,
Yeah.
which is nice.
Interesting.
In their third and final and less successful film, I might add, Under Capricorn from 1948, Bergman plays Henrietta. She's this alcoholic former sweetheart of Michael Wilding, but she's now married to rough and tumble Joseph Cotton. Well, it seems Cotton's character had been a mere stable boy when they got together, and she was from this very aristocratic family, which caused a big scandal. So there's also a little secret involved that Cotton's character and Bergman's character hide and keep. And it's what really kind of cements their connection and what keeps them together for better or worse, as you'll see if you see the movie. It's a period piece. It's set in the 1830s in Australia, and it was a box office bomb, which was a rare misfire for Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes.
But the public's rejection of this film may have been influenced by the revelation in 1949 that Ingrid Bergman, who had been married to Dr. Peter Lindstrom, was having an adulterous affair and subsequently got pregnant by the very married Italian film director Roberto Rossellini.
Yes.
So I think it was the public, could not support Ingrid.
Oh, get over it, people.
I know. I love how Ingrid went from being saint to whore, in 2 minutes.
I know.
In fact, in 1950, and I find this fascinating, Ingrid Bergman was actually denounced on the floor of the U.S. Senate by Senator Edwin C. Johnson, who said that she was an apostle for degradation and a powerful influence for evil.
You have got to be kidding me.
She's a film actress, people.
That's just horrific.
I know.
She probably never wanted to come back to the United States.
No.
I know she did.
Well, she was exiled. She definitely
she was.
left, and she went to Europe, and she made, Italian movies with Rossellini, which was some very good movies she made over there.
Yes.
They later got married, and she did eventually return to Hollywood in great triumph when she came back and won her second Oscar for Anastasia in 1956. They remained lifelong friends, Hitchcock and Bergman, up until his death in 1980. And of course, she died 2 years later on her birthday. So interesting, complicated relationship there.
Right. Before we jump into the other folks that we're going to talk about, I think it's time for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Of course, it will be Hitchcock themed, as you can imagine. He loved to collaborate with family. His wife Alma was his closest advisor, and she was also a writer on many of his films like Suspicion, Shadow of a Doubt, Stage Fright. He also employed his daughter Patricia as an actress in 3 of his films. Can you name the 3 films that Patricia Hitchcock appears in?
I know one of them.
It's a good one.
Yes, it is. We'll be right back with the answer and more on Hitchcock collaborators after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. 1951's The African Queen is considered by many people to be one of the single best movies in classic Hollywood. It was directed, of course, by John Huston, starred Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn. You probably remember it also got Bogart his only Oscar. That was for Best Actor. Well, it was shot on location in the Congo in Africa. That's why the scenery looked so real. But many of the cast and crew got sick from drinking the local water and eating the food. 2 people who didn't get sick? Well, that would be John Huston and Humphrey Bogart. Neither drank the local water or ate local food. Bogart said he's stuck to eating just canned asparagus and washing that all down with scotch. How's that for dedication to one's craft? And now, back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody, as we speak about Alfred Hitchcock and his frequent collaborators. But before we get back into it, I wanted to give a big shout out to our listener of the week. And this week, we're going to honor Kay McPherson from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you, Kay, for all the great comments, all the great likes, all the great spreading the word about us. We really appreciate the support.
Thank you, Kay. Well, if you're of a certain age, you might remember this next actor from The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yes.
He played Alexander Waverly in 105 episodes. He was also on The Girl from U.N.C.L.E.
Yes, that's right.
And of course, it's Leo G. Carroll.
I love him.
But what a career he had prior to his time on television. Leo G. Carroll's collaborations with Alfred Hitchcock total 6 films, making him one of the director's most frequent actors, second only to a couple of people that you're going to mention in a minute. Now, he was a prominent member of Hollywood's British colony, and that's how he got the attention of Alfred Hitchcock. It's so funny, though, as a kid, I just thought he had a funny way of speaking. I didn't think of him as British. I just thought, he was just very upper class, Yeah. So his first collaboration with Alfred Hitchcock is in Rebecca, 1940. This was also Hitchcock's first American film, which won the Oscar for Best Picture. Now, Carroll plays Rebecca's doctor, Dr. Baker. It's a minor role, but significant character. He follows that with Suspicion in 1941. He plays Captain Melbeck. Now, Lena, played by Joan Fontaine, convinces Cary Grant to work for his cousin, Captain Melbeck, who's an estate agent. Gradually, Lena learns that Johnny, Cary Grant, has continued to gamble wildly despite promising to quit. And
Johnny's a bad boy.
He's a bad boy. And she discovers that he was fired by Captain Melbeck, Leo G. Carroll, because he was embezzling money. And and he says he's not going to prosecute if the money is repaid. So it's a good role, again, rather small. But in 1945, Leo G. Carroll takes on a much more substantial role in Spellbound.
Yes.
Again, we just talked about it. He plays Dr. Murchison. He's a psychiatrist who's forced into retirement as head of this institution that Gregory Peck's character has come to take over. Now, it's kind of interesting because he essentially plays the villain in this story. We don't learn that until the very end.
Yes, the big reveal.
Yeah, it is. The film also features famed acting teacher Michael Chekhov. I studied Michael Chekhov's technique for a couple of years, and he was nominated for an Academy Award for his performance. Yeah. Yes. The Paradine Case, 1947, is Leo G. Carroll's next film. He plays...
this is one of the few Hitchcock movies I've never seen.
Well,
I know.
I watched it last night.
Oh, how was it?
Yeah, it's very good. I love me some Gregory Peck.
Yes.
And Ann Todd is really lovely.
I love her. I think she's so underrated.
She's really wonderful. So Leo G. Carroll plays Sir Joseph, who's the counsel for the prosecution in this courtroom drama. It's the story of an English barrister. It's the second collaboration with Gregory Peck, who falls in love with a woman who is accused of murder. And this affects, obviously, his relationship with his wife, played by Ann Todd. If you're seeing a pattern here with Leo G. Carroll, the pattern consists of doctors, professors,
yes,
people that are of the white-collar world, wealthy, little upper crust, good fathers.
Yeah.
Like this next one, Strangers on a Train.
Yes.
1951. Now, we talked about this in our Robert Walker episode.
And the Ruth Roman episode.
Leo G. Carroll plays Ruth Roman's father, Senator Morton. And he was so liked by Alfred Hitchcock that he decides to cast Leo G. Carroll, who's a Brit, as an American playing the part of a U.S. senator.
Yes.
So I think that says a lot.
He loved him. Yeah. Yes. Love the guy.
And then in North by Northwest, 1959, Carroll plays the role of the professor.
Shocker.
Now, he's not on screen for very long, but he's this big muckety-muck in the spy agency. He's one of the higher-ups. It's a really key role. He gives Cary Grant's character and us as the audience the key pieces of information about kind of what's happening in the story, because we really don't know why they think Cary Grant is who they think he is. So the professor is also kind of this cold character that won't rescue Cary Grant's character because it's going to risk the larger mission. And it's only when he realizes that Thornhill, Cary Grant, can be of help to him that he clues him into what's going to happen. He's all about the mission at hand. I mean, even his final line in the film, I think it's one of his final lines, is, "War is hell, Mr. Thornhill, even when it's a cold one." And so he's, that very officious character. He has such a wonderful face, though. There's something about his voice and just his ability to, you kind of feel secure with him. You kind of, when he walks on screen, you just kind of feel like, okay, everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the American version of him is like Leon Ames.
Yes.
Who has that great dad face that you just feel safe and comfortable with. Yes.
Exactly. Well, his career spanned theater, film, and television, although the theater was his first love.
Aww.
He reportedly appeared in over 300 plays during his career, and he was also a method actor who truly lived the parts. He was quoted as saying, "The theater, it's brought me much pleasure of the mind and heart. I owe the theater a great deal. It owes me nothing."
Oh, nice quote.
Yeah.
Wow, I love him. What a good actor. I think a lot of movie fans are going to be a little surprised to hear about the two actors who appeared in more Alfred Hitchcock movies than anybody else.
I know. I was really surprised.
I was surprised, actually. I didn't know this either. It wasn't James Stewart.
Nope.
It wasn't Grace Kelly.
Nope.
It wasn't Ingrid. It wasn't Cary. It was two little-known British character actors. The first was a guy named John Longden. He was a very frequent collaborator with Hitchcock. He appeared in 6 of Hitchcock's early films,
Wow.
beginning with the lead role in the 1929 drama Blackmail, which was actually Hitchcock's very first full-length European feature film. He also made Elstree Calling in 1930, Juno and the Paycock, 1930 also.
I didn't know that.
I know. The Skin Game, 1931, Young and Innocent, 1937, and then finally Jamaica Inn, 1939, which we do know,
yes,
which starred Maureen O'Hara and Charles Laughton.
Right.
Longden was born in the West Indies on November the 11th, 1900. He set out to be a mining engineer, but he started acting in amateur plays and was bitten by the bug, and that was it.
We know how that goes.
Forget mining and welcome the stage. He made his film debut in silent films beginning in 1926, and he worked consistently, mostly in England, until 1964. He died in London on May 26, 1971, at the age of 70.
Wow.
And that leads us to the actor who appeared in more Hitchcock movies than anybody.
Yes.
And
it's quite a number.
It's quite a number. She appeared in 7 Hitchcock movies, and her name is Claire Greet. Does that ring a bell?
Nope.
I was the same. I was really surprised to learn that she was his most frequent collaborator.
Yeah.
You know, she has this craggy, expressive face. She kind of looks like a fortune teller. Mm-hmm. You know, she does. And she conveys this world-weary heaviness that really adds great emotional impact to her roles. Mm-hmm. She was born in London on June 14th, 1870 or 71. I've read 2 different places. It's 2 different years. She began her career on the stage. She appeared in lots of theater before finally collaborating with Hitchcock in 1922 on the silent film Number 13, which was a drama about an older couple dealing with housing insecurity in London.
Wow.
Which was an interesting, socially prominent topic of the day. You know, the film had been partially funded by Alfred Hitchcock's uncle, John Hitchcock. And midway through production, the film lost its funding, so Claire Greet, the actress, invested her own money in the project to help get it made or finished.
I hope she got it back.
Well, her money still wasn't enough. The project ended up going away. It was never completed, and both Greet and John Hitchcock lost their money. So this was humiliating for young Hitchcock, and he vowed never to lose an investor's money ever again, earning him a reputation for shooting his movies on or under budget and schedule with great commercial success. He never forgot Greet's generosity and her belief in him, and he repaid her generously by casting her in more movies than any other actor.
Wow.
She appeared in a total of 7. The first, after the disaster of Number 13, was the silent film The Ring, which was a boxing drama where she played this mysterious fortune teller. Next, she played the mother of leading lady Anna Andre in the love triangle drama The Manxman, 1929, followed by Murder, ! You got to get that in there, from 1930 as a jury member. She also appeared in the first version of The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1934, which starred Peter Lorre. Sabotage, 1936, where she played Sylvia Sidney's cook. And finally, like John Longden, her last Hitchcock movie was Jamaica Inn, 1939, where she played Charles Laughton's tenant. Besides her movies with Hitchcock, she also appeared in many silent movies, Into the Talkies. She was a very prolific English actress. She died at the age of 67 on Valentine's Day, 1939, shortly after finishing production on Jamaica Inn.
So she wasn't that old when she died.
She wasn't that old. And she never married. She didn't have children, so she didn't really leave any survivors. And I can't help but wonder, had she lived longer, how many more films Hitchcock would have placed her in.
And would she have eventually come over to the United States?
Yeah, I wonder.
And been a character actress here.
But I didn't really know about her, so this was really fun to discover.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to say about the actors that he worked with, about him, and so many films of his to watch.
Yeah, so many.
Yeah. Well, what's the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz?
Well, the question was, Hitchcock cast his own daughter, Patricia, in 3 of his famous movies. Can you name them?
Well, one of them is Stranger on a Train. I know that for sure.
Oh, and she's so good as Ruth Roman's little inquisitive sister who looks a lot like the woman who was murdered.
Yes,
and it's such a good
so
role.
much like the woman who was murdered.
Exactly. Well, the other two she was in Stage Fright, and she was also in Psycho. If you remember, the first part of the movie, when Janet Leigh's at her office at the bank, she plays a work colleague.
Yes, she does.
Yeah. So Hitchcock took care of Pat.
Yeah, he did. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We would love it if you would follow us on social media and if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. Our social media handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign, and we are on Instagram, Facebook, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And you can also email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.